Rebuilding the American Hotel is kind of my main goal up here.
We were this close. We were at the 5-yard line of getting this thing poured and being able to frame right now, and the flash flood hit.
And so what we're gonna do is start down this steep wash and just hike down and see what artifacts we can find. Is that the coolest thing you found up here so far?
Definitely.
I heard this story about this can of gold coins.
Maybe onto a big find here, so we're going up.
Yeah, but there's got
So about 2 weeks ago, Death Valley National Park got hit with what they're calling a 1,000-year flood. It just completely destroyed the park. All of the roads got washed out, and it was just destruction everywhere. And where I'm sitting right now at Cerro Gordo, we're only 6 miles from the edge of Death Valley National Park. And behind me is a 7-mile dirt road where we get all of our supplies, all of our contractors, all of our everything up and down. And that road just got completely destroyed during this flood. It went from very passable just down to bedrock. And the first few days, there was absolutely no way to pass this. And to me, it was really disheartening. Because if you've been watching this channel, you know that rebuilding the American Hotel is kind of my main goal up here. And to rebuild that, we need contractors to be able to get up here. We need cement trucks to get up here. We need timber to get up here. All of these things need to happen, and they need to happen now because we need to try to enclose this building before the winter. If we miss the winter, and it's a difficult winter, we're gonna miss 8 months of building, and this project is gonna get pushed another year or so. And to me, that's just almost unimaginable after all of the ups and downs with this.
All right, another early morning, and today what we have to do is we need to get in the tie-ins. And the tie-ins are the things that tie the basement to the first floor. There's these huge kind of screws that are gonna tie the whole building together. And this is part of the bar detail that has to go in before the final course of block. So the final row of block. We were this close. We were at the 5-yard line of getting this thing poured and being able to frame right now, and the flash flood hit. And so, you can think of a million ways this thing could have gone differently, or you could think of what you have to do right now. We need to somehow get this road in the shape it can get concrete trucks up. It's gonna be a lot of work. The county's gonna take 10 weeks, and we're already gonna start pushing into what would be winter. And so this flash flood has really kind of thrown everything off course. But at the end of the day, as I just said, what else are you gonna do but the work that you need to? And so you can hear saws going. I'm gonna get down there. We're gonna put up these tie-ins. We're gonna put in the rebar. We're gonna hopefully get it inspected and try to keep this thing moving along. It's what we have to do.
So the first few days after the flood, I was just devastated. We had an excavator up here, so I brought that down, dumped hundreds of yards of material on the road just to get it passable by trucks. After that had to be returned, so I rented a backhoe. It was the only thing available. All right, so the backhoe's here, and we're gonna slowly start down here at the bottom. It's not that bad down here. It gets worse and worse as you go up. And so the idea is to get this thing smooth enough so we can get the concrete truck up. Pretty much everywhere in the area isn't renting any loaders right now. They said that it's gonna be probably a couple weeks more still cleaning up Death Valley. So all the heavy machinery's out there working on that. But for now, we got this little guy, which is gonna take a lot longer to work with than that big excavator that Dave had, but we're gonna do what we can with what we have. And working on the road with a backhoe just felt like pouring a water bottle into the sea. There's just so much road to work on, and the backhoe can just do such little progress. It was looking very much like this thing was gonna get pushed another year, which had me really down. But luckily, about halfway through working on the road, we got some good news. The county, which originally said it was gonna take 10 weeks to get out here and work on the road, was suddenly able to come out here. If you look, I will say, to the county's credit, this is a motor grader. That is a loader from Inyo County. We are not very far up the road right now. We're just barely beginning, but they're here.
They're here, which is a huge relief to me. That means that if we can get this road back in passable shape, there's still a chance, no matter how small that chance might be, there is still a chance that we can get this basement poured and that we can continue working on the hotel. In the meantime, if you look, I'm coming back. I have mortar in the back here. We had one more row of block to do. So I'm bringing this mortar up so the masons can finish their job. Once the masons finish their job, then we can pour, then we can start framing. And we already have the wood, we have everything ready to go. And I can't wait to see this thing come back to life. If you look, you also see that I have a spare because over the last 2 weeks, I've popped 2 tires going up this road. This road didn't look anything like this a matter of days ago. So shout out Inyo County. This is huge. This is gonna allow people to continue visiting the town and everything else. And so with that, we're gonna head back up to town. We're gonna check in on the masons. And also this weekend, we have a ton of volunteers here. I have to give a huge shout out to everybody that responded after the last video. I'm still sorting through the emails, but a lot of you guys said, hey, how can I help? And because the county's here, there's not too much to do on the road, but there's always lots to do up in town. So up there right now, we have probably 10 projects going at once, as well as the masons. So we're gonna get back in the truck, go up there, and continue checking in on everything going on here at Cerro Gordo. All right, so as you guys can tell, we're back up here and we're not letting a little bit bumpy road stop any progress. Now that we can get past, we are rocking and rolling. You can look over there. We got people putting up the final block. We got a cleanup crew up here working on the hotel to clean that stuff up. And I am in just a much better mood than I was 2 weeks ago, But given that the county had that kind of under wraps, we were able to use that time and just do a general cleaning of the entire town. And it wasn't just for cleaning, it's a time for everybody to hang out, relax, enjoy the space, catch up a little bit, maybe learn something new about Cerro Gordo. That's what's so important to me. It's so important that this town survives for future generations. So we had the whole town being worked on. We had people cleaning the hoist, cleaning in here, cleaning out by the tool shed, helping move block for the masons. The masons were working. It just felt like the town was alive again. And considering how far the town was from 2 weeks ago, that meant a lot, And so in the end, I just hope to have more and more of these events to bring people up here. I think it's one thing to look at the place online, but to come up here and experience it yourself is just so different, and it just kind of captures the energy of the place. And I've just been really heartwarmed over the last few years to see the community grow and grow, to see more people come up here and have their own personal stories. And I hope to have many, many more of these kind of reunion weekends in the coming years. And after struggling for all these weeks, I finally decided to take a little bit of a breather. I think sometimes I push myself really hard up here. And after looking at the road and seeing that, 3-4 feet of material were moved in different sections, I thought, what a better time to take a walk, to walk a wash, to see maybe what artifacts from this mining area were uncovered after hundreds of years due to this huge flood. And so with that, I went back to one of my favorite washes to walk down and see what we might discover. Getting a pretty early start to it. This is almost returning to my roots here at Cerro Gordo. I think recently a lot of my days have felt very management heavy, managing the contractors for the hotel, managing just all the growing projects. Sometimes when things get really busy, it's so tempting to be like, I don't have any time to go explore. There's Death Valley. That's what just got recently decimated in some ways, or at least the roads. And so what we're gonna do is start down this steep wash and just hike down and see what artifacts we can find, what I can document, and hopefully be able to start creating a better record of everything around here, both on the video and otherwise. So let's go give it a shot. So if you watch this channel for a while, you know that I am far from an expert in many things. I think that my progression in everything from dirt bike riding
to mine exploration and everything else, just surviving in the wilderness, is part of what's been captured over the last 2.5 years making this channel. You know, and a big part of that is trying to capture the history here to the best of my abilities. You know, but at the end of the day, I'm definitely not an archaeologist. You know, that's just not my training at all. And I remember a few months ago, I was passed this paper titled YouTube as a Historical Process. The paper was written by Joshua Emmett, who's over at the University of Auckland. You know, he has his PhD in anthropology, and I read it and it just lit me up actually. Every day here, I'm interacting with items from the past. And luckily, Joshua was nice enough to jump on a Zoom with me, and we just were able to chat through things I'd be doing better.
In terms of practical things, I think there's a lot of, like, your videos are great. Like, you've got those stored, I imagine, and those records of the mines. I mean, what happens if something actually collapses some of your mines by some process? Your videos might be the last record of those actual mines, you know? And that's really important. But also, like, the 3D models that you had those people come in and do, like, more of that stuff would be really cool. I was always thinking that with the plans of the tunnels of the mines that you've got and the 3D models, you could even one day have an app where you can stand on the surface and kind of see all the mines and the mountain around you, so you can kind of see where they are. You know, all these things with the right data aren't outside the realms of possibility.
One of the things that we talked about was just categorizing everything in here. You know, just picking a number and starting there. And anytime I find something, let's say this dynamite box, for instance, you know, at this point, to be fully honest with you, I can't remember where I found this box. I know it was in a mine. I want to guess that maybe it was at the 200 level, but that's not really good enough, you know. But had I been doing this over the past 2.5 years, every one of these items would have been categorized. And I think what I got most excited about when I was talking to Joshua is just data allows you to see trends. You know, as we find different things across the different hillsides here, if we map them, let's say we have a giant map of Cerro Gordo, and every single thing that's found from here on out, we map on that map. Over the coming decades, patterns are going to emerge. You know, maybe we keep finding assay-related items in a specific part of the hillside. That might tell us that, hey, maybe this part of the hillside was an assay office back in the day. And due to the recent flash floods and everything else, I'm excited to go out there and see what's there. You know, excited not just because I think there's gonna be some cool things there, but to start this new kind of chapter of my explorations, this chapter of more documentation, this categorization. You know, already in this wash, there's all sorts of stuff. There's obviously pieces of larger mining equipment, like those pipes up there. There's even small stuff like, you know, this can, for instance, and some beautiful rock. And if I would have been on this hike even a day ago, I would have completely just not thought about this can at all. But I'm kind of interested in mapping this hike alone in the archaeological way that, you know, Joshua told me about yesterday. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to get a photo of each of these things that I see. So take a photo of that and then try to get the GPS coordinates of each of these too. And so that way, you know, when the time comes, let's see here, I'll have all of these things, and that way I can map this hike on this date. And then over time, let's say that I do this hike again in a couple of years and things have moved, then I can see some type of like patterns, you know, how things are moving, how quickly they're moving. That might give me a better indication that how over the last 150 years, you know, all this has changed. All right, this one is fun. It looks like an old skillet. You know, that's how they would have cooked. I love stuff like this because it just adds that human element to it. You know, when you see the big pipes and stuff, you understand that it was used for mining. But this, like, somebody was making breakfast here. So that means somebody was living up here. You know, so I'm gonna take a photo of that again, get the GPS, and keep moving with it all. I also think that this hike might take a bit longer. So if you look, it's a bit mesmerizing. Just kind of doing this desert surfing. And I think for me, coming out here and doing something like this, especially after the flood and all that, it just kind of puts everything into perspective. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in goals and like, I need to get this done by this date. But if I am looking at it over a long enough timeline, these things will get done. And returning out here just helps remind me of that, you know, helps me remind me of that timeless nature of everything around here, and it's needed. I'm a little nervous to go down this wash because I don't know where this wash terminates, and the last thing you want to do is to get cliffed out, meaning you get to the end of a wash and it's just a big cliff. I know this way doesn't get cliffed out, so I'm going to keep going this way a little bit further. We do have to be a bit cautious because the last thing you want to do is have to backtrack a long ways. This is here. This is some piece of equipment that I'm not sure what it is. If you guys have any ideas, do let me know. It seems to be fairly large. There's a lot of this big equipment around here. So they're definitely doing some type of milling, it feels like, up there. Don't necessarily know. Maybe something to either muck out or get ore out. That's what I'm thinking. And they just left all the machinery, it seems like, up there when they were done. Look how steep this gets. It's over there. All right, we're gonna go down a little bit. I don't want to backtrack up this, but at the same time, I mean, what's that? You can tell over here, that is a pretty steep cliff slash wash. I could probably scramble down in that, but that seems like an almost guaranteed way to get cliffed out. And so, I need to go over there. Hello. So, still no confirmation that that's a cliff, but all appearances give that indication. So we're gonna keep, might be able to go down there and then cross over a canyon there. I think that's the best move at this point. All right, a little backtracking, exactly what I didn't want to do. Back up this shale, that just gives more time to find some cool stuff. So let's do it, see what happens. All right, I'm back from the hike. First stop, as usual, is over to the Element. I love this stuff. I drink it pretty much every day. You know, all it is sodium, potassium, magnesium. There's none of that added sugars or anything like that, but just make sure that you have all the electrolytes you need. You know, it's almost like 100 degrees down in the valley, and this stuff just keeps me from getting those terrible dehydration headaches. You just grab one of these, throw it in a cup, mix it up, and you're pretty much set. And right now, Element is giving a free 8 sample pack with any purchase to everybody watching this. All you have to do is go to drinkelement.com, so drinklmnt.com/Brent, and they'll give that to you. It's a great way to try a lot of their products. It's totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. I love this stuff. They've been a huge supporter of the town, so I really hope you check it out. All right, so after walking that wash, I'm just more and more fascinated with taking this archaeology to the next level. You know, it just seems like it's gonna be one of those new interests that really takes me. So if you're out there, you're an archaeologist, you're an archaeology teacher, maybe you wanna bring your class up here, or you wanna do anything related to that, or you have resources that you think I might find interesting, please reach out. You know, like I said, my email is brent@cerrogordomines.com. I just think that this is gonna become my new obsession of sorts over the next few months. So I'd love to hear from any of you guys. So if your goal is to fill a museum, if it is to uncover remnants from the past over huge swaths of earth, like 400 acres here, then eventually you start thinking, what's just underneath the ground? You know, what do they bury? What do they drop? What did these 4,000 miners leave behind and never recover? You know, because pretty much anytime I move dirt up here, whether it's the backhoe or anything else, something pops up. You know, I found 32 bottles at once before. Just the other day, Trevor, the guy that works here, he found this general store coin from Cerro Gordo that on the back says it's good for 12.5 cents.
Found it just behind the Belshaw house. We were digging some trenches for water lines and just scooped it up. There she is. Backside.
Is that the coolest thing you found up here so far?
Definitely. Yeah.
You guys busted out the metal detector pretty much right afterwards?
Oh yeah.
And this is a coin that nobody's seen before. You know, even I've sent it to the historians and they don't know exactly the era of Cerro Gordo it's from. And that's amazing. You know, it's so cool to think that every piece that's uncovered helps tell the story here better. And so with that, eventually you get to metal detecting. You know, whenever you want to think what's under the surface, metal detecting is an easy thing to come up. So about 8 months ago, we invited up 50 people and we all took a day of metal detecting. And I gotta say, it was beautiful. You know, it was just so cool to see so many people enjoying this space. And so for this time, we decided to double it. We went with 100 people coming up for metal detecting.
All right, I'm inside my house right now and I'm just kind of mentally preparing because today we have the most people that have come to Cerro Gordo probably in the last 100 years because we have a metal detecting event today and there's supposed to be 100 people coming up. We have to camp close to 100 people that are gonna be spending the night here, but I'm excited. You know, it just feels like maybe what the town might have been like back in the day, you know, to have this many people here. I have high hopes that we're gonna find something. I always heard this story about this can of gold coin, so I really want to find a gold coin. I don't know if that's gonna happen over the next 2 days, but having 100 people here, I feel like we're bound to find something. So with that, let's head outside.
Horseshoe. All right. I like
a
that.
tiny one, huh?
Maybe like for the mules up here back in the day.
Yeah.
Where'd you find that?
Right over in the original road.
Yeah.
Belt buckle.
Belt buckle? From
Sardine can.
stand.
Yeah.
I got this little guy earlier. Looks like a brooch or a fancy button or something like that.
Perfume bottle.
Whoa, that's cool.
If you look on it, it says evening in Paris.
Oh yeah,
I found it
evening
right
in
here.
Paris. Right here.
Right there.
Whoa. You know, as everybody was calling it quits, you know, everybody was kind of sun-beaten down from 2 days. Everybody was out. There was one guy yelling. Just around the town, around the corner, someone had found what was an old cabin site. And there's other artifacts up there like bottles and tins and different things. But the reason he was yelling was something that we've been looking for a very long time. Maybe onto a big find here, so we're going up.
So I'll let you, there's a piece of paper in it, so I didn't want to move it around too much.
Really?
Yeah, but there's got, when I tilted it, I opened the lid up.
Oh yeah, look at all that. It's like
Looks to be more than lead.
they're stashing their taking. Look at this little cloth too.
Yeah. Cloth paper, I wasn't sure.
It's definitely somebody's hiding spot. Maybe an old handkerchief.
I'm gonna use that to keep it
Yeah.
from making noise.
Oh yeah, so it doesn't rattle around. Whoa. Look at that.
I don't think it's lead.
More paper, like you said, maybe they're wrapping it in something.
Or they were gonna take it to the assay office.
This was already refined, so this would have been after that process.
Pretty old can, because you see the
Yeah.
lead seam on it, so that's pretty old.
Yeah.
And they opened it with a knife. I mean, they didn't even have a
Yeah.
can opener.
That's crazy.
There's another piece in there. Silver should be in the 75 to 90. It's showing up as 70.
I'll put more of it in my hand.
80.
Ooh. There we go.
80, 83, 85.
Heck yeah. Some guy was stashing a
Refreshments.
silver in an old can. We made a bunch of jokes about it, but
Yeah, it looks more like silver to me because lead sometimes would have gotten particularly oxidized over this period of time.
Oh.
And so if it's still shining pretty good.
It doesn't bend either. It won't bend.
Yeah.
It's pretty strong. It's not lead-like.
Yeah. Pretty cool, huh? Obviously this guy was like doing this for a reason, right? It's not like we just found something that somebody might have dropped. This was like his stash.
Way back. It's strange that someone would lose something that valuable after they put so much time and effort into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That looks like a very similar can.
Oh yeah. Oh, that thing looks buried on.
After 2 adventures, 2 different times, hundreds of people metal detecting, we literally found a can with silver inside of it by a tree. And this is basically everything that I've been hoping for, dreaming for, thinking about for years.
So the can, he found it right here by the trees, which makes sense, you know? You have to figure back in the day, a miner would have been hot after a lot of work. He would have sat by a tree, and that also would have been a landmark, you know, for them to hide out something. And so sitting by this tree when it was much smaller, probably put the can there. You know, we're decent ways from town right now. So it's interesting to think that there was a lot of settlement here, which I didn't know, which means, you know, we're gonna send a lot more people up here, try to melotech up here, see what else we can find. You know, who knows, maybe we found a hot patch that hasn't been detected in a really long time. So I hear beeping over there, so that's a good sign.
Hey man, yeah, that's incredible. Saw my eyes. Put the detector down. You know what though? I find a lot of shit.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, so once again, thank you everybody for being here today. We got all sorts of new things added to it. There was the jaw harp. I thought that was a great find. I'm actually thinking about making a music studio here, so maybe we'll have to add some jaw harps modern to that. This bullet that's still full.
I found this, whatever it is.
Whoa! You wanna hold it up? Anybody got guesses of what this is? I have no idea. Golf balls, that's a big question mark. I don't know where these would have came from. I'll just confiscate these just in case so that way nobody else does anything with that. Okay, well thank you. That's pretty awesome.
He had the metal detector, I had the metal detector, we were just going back and forth, 15 minutes, and I was just like, had to take a step back, take a break, and then was just sitting there and then looked at the ground, and then this thing was just staring right at me. So I picked it up, showed all the guys, and something Claire patent, December 12th, 1865, Newark, New Jersey.
And the crazy part to me is that it still works. You know, some guy back in the day was using this to lock his house, probably forgot it, and now it's here. You know, and so it might just seem to a lock, but it's a lock from somebody at Cerro Gordo. And to me, that just makes it all that much more important.
So the can I found at a small mine that's on the edge of that ridge over there.
Oh yeah.
So inside of it was a mining claim. It's yours now.
So it looks like it says, was it the Lincoln Lode?
Yeah, Lincoln Lode.
And it says load claim. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Lode. And maybe this came from the Lincoln Lode too. So in there was a bunch of, there's cloth and paper and then different metals. Yeah, it doesn't bend as easy as lead would, so I don't think he's right. But
we'll go with silver until someone tells us
exactly. So there's a can full of silver, which is pretty sweet. For me, it's kind of like the humanizing of it, right? That somebody like cut this can open to put his stuff in there. To me, that's a lot more interesting than just like a randomly discarded thing, because there's like intention behind it.
Yeah.
So I'm back here where we found the can, and obviously that was just such a crazy experience. That's something I've been talking about for literally years up here. You know, finding a can of some guy that hid it away with his secret stash in it, and just so cool. But the big question still remains. You know, the big question for me, even with all these side distraction, is still how are we gonna get this American hotel enclosed by the winter? You know, luckily with the county working on the road, we were able to get the masons up here. And considering that the road was completely impassable just over 2 weeks ago, that was a huge improvement.
So this is where I stood just about a month ago, and there's just those deep ravines through all of this. And if you look now, it's starting to come back. You know, it's not finished yet. There's a lot of material dumped in, but it's getting there. You know, when you looked up this after the flood, you would have just seen bedrock. So you can see how much material just had to be moved in here. And it's coming back together, which is really exciting. And there's still a lot to do above this, but I'm hopeful that, you know, within a week or two, we could potentially get the cement trucks up here, which would mean a lot for the project and the progress of the town. So fingers crossed to that. This is the road.
Again, this is such a tight timeline. I don't really know, but what else are you gonna do other than push? And so at this point, I'm pushing to get whatever I can do on the hotel ready to go. And to me, that's just part of it. You know, there's been so many ups and downs here. There's been so much test of will. But at the end of the day, I think once this hotel's up, it's just gonna make that much more of a story. You know, it's gonna be that much more rewarding in the end. And so at this point, be on the lookout. What we're gonna need is the county to finish the road, the cement trucks to agree to come up, to pass inspection, and to get framing. That's what's on the horizon. You know, one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is just the dog days of not just summer, but of big projects. You know, those days that are just long, grueling, uncomfortable, and seem to just drag on and on. And you know, we have that term for this time of the summer. And side note, I didn't know why we called it that, but it turns out that back in the day when Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, would come into view in ancient Greece, they knew that would signify these long, grueling summer days. And Sirius is also known as the dog star, hence the dog days of summer. But with big projects, you kind of feel those dog days too. You know, there's the initial excitement that comes when you just get going. You're excited about the ideation phase, maybe a little bit of attention, a little traction, people caring about it. Then that kind of starts to peter a little bit. Then you have kind of this trough, you know, this area where you really reveal yourself to yourself. You know, it's long, it's grueling, it's difficult. It's like those midsummer days where it's just generally unpleasant. And when I think about those days, I think about a lot of things. I think, you know, one option obviously is to quit. You know, you could just throw in the towel, say, you know, I've had enough of this. But I think any big project like this, in fact, I know any big project like this has those days. So if you're gonna quit every time that it gets into these dog days, these long days of big projects, you're never gonna make it to the other side. You know, you're always gonna find yourself a couple years down the road in a position where it's difficult again and you're quitting. And so for me, you know, I think about that a lot. You know, I think about no matter what, these things are gonna happen. And so they may as well happen for projects that you care deeply about, you know, things that you really are passionate about, that you have dreams towards. You know, I just watched this documentary that was called The Burden of Dreams. You know, it was Werner Herzog when he was trying to put together a movie in the jungle. And at one point he looks at the camera and he says, of course I have to do this project. You know, if I didn't do this project, I'd be a man with no dreams, and that's not the type of life I want to live. And I resonate with that, you know, I resonate with that a lot. You know, he was trying to bring this ship over a mountain. It was this insane thing. I would check it out if you haven't. But at the end of the day, these types of days happen. They're normal. And I think reminding yourself, no matter where you are, no matter what you're into, that these types of days are gonna happen and that they're part of it. And you have to find a way to love it even. You know, there's the Latin phrase amor fati, which means a love of fate, meaning, you know, no matter what, no matter how much you wish things to be otherwise, they're not going to be. So what stronger response, what stronger reply than just to love everything that happens to you? You know, if you're able to get to that place where you can get to that mentality, then basically everything is just fuel to you. You know, you're not in this, oh, why is this happening to me? You're like, you know what? This is happening to me, but I'm glad because I can handle it. And I think over the last few months with the flash flood, with the hotel differences and all this, I've been thinking a lot about that concept of these dog days. And what gets me through the most is a couple things. It's a reliance on not just yourself, but your team and your community and a belief in those things. You know, I'm really fortunate these days where Trevor and Scotty are up here full time. You know, they can make sure that the town progresses forward even when I'm feeling a little deflated. And then beyond that, we've seen time and time again this community. You know, all of you out there just rally behind, as happened just last week. You know, when the flood happened, just hundreds of people emailed in wanting to help in so many different ways to keep this project moving forward. And it just means so, so much to me. You know, and so I guess all that to say, thank you. You know, thank you all so, so much. Your support just truly means everything to me. And I think if you're out there and you're tackling your project, no matter how big or small, and you're in kind of these dog days where you feel like they're long, they're grueling, they're repetitive, just know that there is going to be an end to that. And it's just going to make it all that much more satisfying. You know, you're not alone. It's going to happen no matter what project you do. So I hope that's a project that you truly love. And it's one that's going to make it all worthwhile when you do get to the other side. I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to watch the rest of the sunset. Sun's just about to go down. But thank you all so, so much for being part of that community and kind of lifting me through all these different areas. It just means the world to me. So until next time, I hope you guys have a great week. Let's watch a sunset.